welcome to podcast 89 from the Wiggly Sofa. I'm Heather from Wiggly Wigglers.
I'm Richard from Wiggly Wigglers.
And I'm Farmer Phil, possibly from Wiggly Wigglers.
You're from the farm, Farmer Phil.
Oh, right.
You didn't know your place.
Little sulk, listener, little sulk. Because you can't see everything, can you? But that was a little sad face from Farmer Phil.
Sadly, I'm not seeing much at all these days. Tennis last night didn't go much anyway.
Well, you've never been any good at tennis.
That's beside the point. Now I can't see the ball, it would appear.
Oh.
Oh dear, that's a shame. So you've got poor eyesight, have you, Phil?
I can't see things close to me anymore. There, I've admitted it now.
That's a shame.
You've got 20/20 vision, you told me.
Well, I always kidded myself I have, but I find myself looking at things further and further away.
Oh dear. Eye test and an ear test for Farmer Phil, because he is as deaf as a post.
Yeah, that's convenient deafness though, Hev.
Does the vet do eye tests?
Anyway, in this week's show, sorry about that, listener. In this week's show, we will learn how a bull is very, very good at pruning your leylandii. We're going to find out about pickling rhubarb leaves for aphid control.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But mainly, we've got Terry Walton on his allotment in Wales. So first off, Rich, let's hear about these rhubarb leaves.
The rhubarb leaves. Well, you always learn something new all the time. I fully imagine that if I went down to see Terry Walton, I'd learn a whole world of new stuff. But one thing that really inspired me is he gets his rhubarb leaves.
Because they're useless, aren't they,
Well,
rhubarb? What can you
really.
do with them?
Poisonous.
And but you see, they're not really poisonous. In fact, that's one thing he said to me. He said, you know what, people say rhubarb leaves are poisonous, but they're not poisonous at all. Not really. You can use them for all sorts of things. So he gets his leaves and he puts them
Can I just have that accent again?
Do you think it was good?
Is he Russian?
So he...
Kazakhstan?
So he gets his leaves and he puts them in a black bin and leaves them in a tub of water, this black bin of water, for a couple of weeks, and the sun gets on there and warms the water up, and they quite literally sort of ferment in this black bin. And he goes in there after a couple of weeks, gets the watering cans full of the stuff, and pours it onto his brassicas, all sorts of... pretty much anything, really, that has any sort of pest infestation. Quite literally. It stinks like nothing you've ever smelt in your life. But the beauty of it is that you get a rainfall, it just washes it off, and you just reapply it. I suppose it is a chemical in a sense, but it's not an artificial, it's not a man-made chemical. So it has no harmful effects at all on the soil. In fact, it does provide some nutrient as well. He uses it on his giant marrows that he grows for the competitions, and I think that helps keep the pests off those, and it stimulates the growth. Keeps everything away. Any aphid infestations, any cabbage white caterpillars, they don't want to go near it. Superb. So I'm going to try it at home, and I've never really heard of anybody having done that before. But
sounds a bit like comfrey tea. I know comfrey tea's not made for the same reasons, but somebody said to me that stinks to high heaven. It
absolutely reeks, completely reeks. But it's a really good, that's a really good liquid feed, comfrey. I mean, it's probably the best.
Do you think that the rhubarb leaves work because of some chemical within them, or is it the stink?
Yeah. It's probably that there's some chemical in them, because often creatures are attracted to the hideous stinks, or stinks that we find hideous.
The cashew liquid really chucks up.
Oh yeah, that's quite hideous.
Yeah.
It's amazing, because folks often say, how on earth can something that smells so disgusting stop my drains from smelling? But of course it does, because when it comes out of that anaerobic environment of a bucket, then there's little microbes that are dormant kick in. So it works slightly differently. So of course it does work. But yeah, that's slightly different. But I think it's all there's all sorts of fermentation processes going on with the rhubarb leaves just as much as with the bokashi. So
talking of competitions, which you were some time ago, Farmer Phil's had a big honour bestowed upon him, haven't you?
Has he?
Yes. So the other night, Rich and I entertained the Harewood End Agricultural Society for an evening of gardening and a bit of a chit-chat about the farm, didn't we?
Yeah.
And so yesterday, they phoned me up and invited me to judge their grass seed crop competitions, which are part of their annual crop competitions. And I forget which podcast it was, but we mentioned agricultural societies in one of our earliest podcasts, I think.
Yeah.
And
we were a little bit critical, weren't we?
Well, a little bit, but Harewood End are one of the more forward-thinking ones. They do, many more competitions and groups of crops and so on. So anyway, I was chuffed to bits to be invited, but then very sad to realise that I couldn't do it because I was going to a course on biodiversity and how to make the best use of it.
I think that's better. There's quite a contrast between judging a grass seed competition and going to learn about biodiversity.
Yeah, but there was a free meal involved with judging the grass seed, Rich.
Oh, there's no free fodder with your biodiversity.
Doubtful. We're going to Bruce Gilbert, so don't know.
Yeah.
For those listeners who don't know about agricultural societies, they were set up, weren't they, to progress farming at a point where we needed food. So am I not right in thinking that actually most of them are in the jolly dark ages and still thinking that farming is just about how much crop you can get off your farm? And did I not see a certain neighbour of ours spraying off all his weeds outside his property for the tidiest farmyard in the world competition? And I thought, oh no, all those nettles have gone, all that habitat's gone, so that you can make it look all pristine.
It is true that one of the hangovers from earlier times was this idea that you get everything pristine, tidy, and of course that's as much because it makes it an easy thing to judge. If your farmyard is totally tidy, then it ticks lots of boxes, it's easy for the judges. But a lot of societies these days have taken on board the environmental requirements of agriculture today, and there are specific competitions for ponds and wildlife strips and management of set-aside and so on. And you know, some of the more forward-thinking societies have included these. The other bit that's perhaps a little old-fashioned is the idea that the women all go and make cakes for competition. And so, to some extent, that's changing. But then again, there is the aspect that for those of us who like to eat the cake, that's pretty good news,
sure.
really.
If the women make them.
Yeah.
Oh yes, let's all hop off, get our free-range eggs and make some jolly good cakes.
What a marvellous idea.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, you had a good evening, did you?
It was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it went very well, didn't
evening.
it?
Good evening by all. A couple of interesting comments. There's one fella, and he said, because I was talking about song thrushes and the fact that you should never use slug pellets or any sort of poisons really, but one of the reasons that song thrushes are in such massive decline is because they're kind of feasting on slugs and snails that have eaten slug pellets. Toxins build up in the body, and then it's curtains. And the one guy said to me, he said, you know what, my gardener told me the other day that song thrushes are just as aggressive as magpies. I said, really? I said, yeah. I said, you sure? He said, yeah, definitely, yeah. He said he was adamant about it. I said, God, you know what? I've never heard, surprisingly enough, I've never heard that before. and he said, yeah. He said, if you've got song thrushes in the garden, you won't have any small birds. I mean, if there's any listeners out there that have experienced this, then I'd love to hear it. I've got to say, because I was, obviously being very diplomatic. I'm perfectly happy to take on board people's comments.
No, you're not.
However misguided.
What happened to my comments then?
Yeah, that's right. But the other classic...
Just to get this clear, if there is any listener that has ever heard of a song thrush causing...
could consider a song thrush as aggressive as a magpie.
Yeah, we don't believe it.
They are quite
We'd like to hear from you.
Am I right in saying that song thrushes are quite territorial?
They're territorial,
so that they will sort out any sort of immigrant song thrushes?
I think yes, definitely. Yeah, they like their singing posts, their little singing pavilions. So they are territorial to that extent. But so far as being as aggressive as magpies, in that they'll attack other birds and raid their nests and eat the youngsters and fledglings and whatnot, I've got to say, I think I've never heard anything quite as ridiculous in all my life. Not to be disparaging, of course.
Well, wasn't there that other thing?
Oh, yeah, but there was another amazing thing as well. You're farmers, you know what they're like. And this one fella, I was talking about worms, and I said how worms can breed. And I said, look, let's go back to school, guys. So I'm going to take you back to school now. What sex are worms? Oh, well, they're both of them. I said, yeah, that's it, excellent. So they breed. What they do is they come together. This little fat patch here, that's about a third of the way down the worm's body, is a saddle. Its proper name is a clitellum. What they do is fuse there, and they'll exchange little parcels of sperm, and they're all ready. It's complete. And then one old boy said, God, you know what? He said, Father told me that little fat patch there was when you cut a worm in half and they joined up again. I said, yeah, and he's 86 years old, so he's probably been going along for 82 years thinking that these little fat patches on every single worm, I hasten to add,
the trouble is,
the point at which worms get chopped in half and magically fuse themselves
the trouble
together.
Is that in Herefordshire there is a longish tradition of sort of telling youngsters a sort of bit of a tall story to see whether they'll take it on board. So the obvious example.
Sure is that?
Backfired.
I think that's
Our neighbour, long-term neighbour, got sent by his father as a youngster to town to get a big bag of skyhooks to hold a sheet on a rick of straw.
Skyhooks, yeah, that's right.
And so he trotted off to town and went into the local agricultural merchant, who saw this straight away and went out the back and got him a big Hessian sack of a load of worn-out plough points and tied the neck of it and gave it to him and said, there you are, take that back to your dad, bag of skyhooks, sign here. And so there's all those rubber staples, go and get a couple of post holes, things like that. Right. And it's just how far you're prepared to go.
Yes, tuck it in. Yeah, but you don't want to carry it with you for 80 years. You've got to pick up at some point that, perhaps I was wrong. All the dodgy information I got from my parents, I like to think that actually I've got to learn now that might not be the case.
Well, I just think it's wonderful that you've actually delivered some value to somebody.
Yeah, completely. Well, you're such a nice fella, such a lovely old boy, really endearing. He came up to Phil and I afterwards and he said, I've got to say, thank you very much, you young fellas, for showing us around. We've had such a fantastic time. I said, that's our pleasure. But by the way, I'm a lot younger than Phil.
Are you?
Oh, yeah, I am, 10 years younger than Phil.
Are you?
Yeah.
Good God, you haven't learned very well, have you?
What happened?
I'm not. How old are you, Phil? I'm 6 years younger, I think, am I? 6 years. 43, aren't you?
I believe I'm 43 this year.
Yeah, 6 years younger than Phil.
No, I might be 44, actually.
He's 44.
He's been lying to me. More lies.
Well, time goes on, I just hadn't noticed.
So, when was your birthday then?
March.
Oh, was it? We didn't give you the bumps or anything. I don't remember any celebrations for Phil's birthday.
I'm not sure there's enough of you up to giving out 44
Perhaps I wasn't here.
bumps.
Was I on holiday? Was that when I was on holiday?
Oh, God, they've moved on to twaddle
anyway.
again.
Yeah, there you are.
Last week's podcast, I told you to shut up. Moving on.
I can't remember.
Okay, so you've been on an adventure down to South Wales.
Yeah. So the idea was you sent me off down to meet Terry Walton. It was a lovely bloke. It's kind of surreal, really, because I've been listening to this guy on the Jeremy Vine show whenever I get the chance, especially if you're driving a car. I'm like, oh, Terry Walton comes on. And I remember listening to him when he very first started, 4 years ago or so. So I turned up, went to his house, gave my directions to his house, which was a good thing because I had struggled to find the allotments. And we went and lifted cups of tea and biscuits and things like that. And then we had a really nice rattle about things. And then he took me up to the allotments, and it's just the allotment that you imagine, this steep bank in the Rhondda Valley, all these greenhouses made of second-hand double glazing. I mean, if you had to buy those greenhouses, they cost you 15 grand each. These guys get their greenhouses out of skips. Absolutely superb, men after my own heart. So you've got
tight.
all this, you've got utterly tight. So you've got all these reuse initiatives made in heaven, across this whole area, and within all these little allotments, there's something like 42 different allotments on this site. You've got a whole plethora of different types of veggies growing. Really interesting stuff. Right opposite Terry's plot, he's got his little, it's what's called Albie's Caff, where his mate has got the allotment above him. Has this little cafe there, and he's got all the tea-making facilities in there, and chairs inside, and then chairs outside, just in case they get a bit of rain or something, they have to sneak inside. A superb little bell that gets rung, folks come down. He did ring the bell on the recording, I think, so if, they ring the bell, tease up, and they all go down, have a rattle, put the worlds to rights, and then get back to their allotments. It's just the most wonderful, sociable place, really. I mean, you can see why, as well, he was picked to go on the Jeremy Vine show. He talks beautifully, and he's very articulate. He's actually a very intelligent bloke, and he gave me a copy of his book, so that was great. And I think we'll probably we'll sell these books. We can, another Wiggly product, but it's a fantastic book. It's all about his life, but around the allotment. So, because he's been on the allotment, man and boy, he was on the allotment when he used to toddle up there after his dad, and he's 4 years old, and his old man gave him a little patch there to grow his radish and his salad and things like that.
Same allotment.
Same allotment, and at one time he had
looked after his soil.
Absolutely, he really does. He's got a really neat way of composting as well that he showed me, which is explained in our little chat. So that's a nice little few tips there for the listener. And,
did you take him a composter?
I took him a wormery. The idea was I wanted to take him a wormery and bokashi bucket, see how he gets on with those. So what I did is we set up the wormery, so we chatted about what he was up to on his allotment while we were setting up the wormery. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. But at the time it seemed to work quite well, but it started to bucket down. It's just we had torrential rainfall. You know what our June's been like, flaming June, anything but flaming really. So we had to shoot in to try and get cover in various places, so Michael might have a bit of fun editing.
Well, let's hear it now, because we'll hear extracts out of the book next week when you're going to review it.
Right.
And so let's hear Ricardo roving to South Wales.
Cue for the Jeremy Vine show. This is it's exactly what happens when we go live on air. We get a pittering pattering on the end of the phone.
Yeah, it's just typical, isn't it?
Just typical.
Big storm coming in from the west.
It's been fine all this time when we work in the rain.
Big depression. Okay,
right.
Well, Terry, it's brilliant to meet you. I'm glad I came down. I found your place really easy as well, which is with my sense of direction. It's pretty amazing, really. So I'm glad I've got here. But we've pulled outside the allotments here. I mean, some of the listeners are going to recognise your voice, I think, because you do many things, don't you? But one of which is featuring regularly on a Jeremy Vine show on a Friday.
Yeah, I'm here something for the weekend, man. I mean, on a Friday afternoon, after all the serious issues of Jeremy Vine throughout the week, all the political broadcasts, all the serious politicians, all the bad news stuff that comes on, I lighten up the show on a Friday afternoon for the last 10 minutes. So Jeremy Vine listeners can go into the weekend full of confidence, fully relaxed, and in a happy mood.
And inspired to grow some veg.
Well, hopefully. I mean, that was the purpose of it in the first place, to get people out into the allotment, to be growing their own. Yeah. And if I can achieve that in about 1% of the listeners of Jeremy Vine show, then we'd probably get another 60,000 gardeners going on allotments, which will please me no end.
Right.
People who can enjoy this hobby and enjoy this sort of life, once they started and do it, they'll thoroughly enjoy it. That's a great way of life.
Fantastic. Well, should we grab hold of this? I brought you down a can of worms to try.
Okay.
And I suppose we're going to set this thing up in this nice warm Welsh rain that we've got.
Welsh rain, it certainly is that. Here we are. We'll walk through these famous gates.
So this is like a barracks. We kind of have had a sneaky preview of your allotment beforehand, and it's the most amazing setup of. I've never seen reuse like it in my life. You said it looked a bit like Soweto when you were.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've been modelled this, and back in the bad days of South Africa when Soweto was a major place. We looked at that and we thought this is exactly what we want our allotments to look like. We want to look homely, we want to look recycled, we want to make full use of all the materials that come out of people's homes in these valleys.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, the resemblance is uncanny.
It is, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't look at a place in the backwaters of South Africa,
not
would
at
it?
Not at all.
And again, one of the beauties of the Rhondda Valley is, I mean, a lot of people have spent money on their homes in the last 20 years, and as the skips arrive in the valley empty, they park them outside the house, they rip out window frames, they rip out doors, they put them in this skip, and before the guy comes to collect them, the skip is then empty and everything's in the allotments. I don't know why they just don't bring them here in the first place. This is the ideal resting place for these. Every bit of recycled material in the valleys can find a home here, whether it's an old bottle to cover some seeds, an old bucket in which to grow a tomato, window frames, bits of wood, we can find a use for all that.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. What's amazing is some of those greenhouses there that are made to double glazing. You know, if you had to pay for a conservatory, it probably cost you about 15 grand. But the reality is you've got them out of the skips and done a good job. So it's absolutely fantastic.
All it takes is a bit of time and a bit of sweat and toil. That's all. You've got a place that'll last you forever.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then you've got a little calf opposite your shed here. This
is now probably one of the most famous places in the Rhondda Valley now.
Right.
You remember back in the days of the last of summer wine, they had the cafe there where they all met. This is the equivalent for the Rhondda Valley. This is the last of the Rhondda wine, and this is a place where on days like today when the rain starts to fall, you're driven off the plot. There's always a welcome. There's a cup of coffee waiting, and if you're lucky, there's a jammy Dodger biscuit, which puts the real icing on the cake.
Yeah, you were showing me there's a bell up here next to just inside the door here, because I said,
right.
how do you know when the brew's ready for you, and how does everybody know when you're right across the allotment?
Well, I mean, it's a bit difficult at the moment because the inner door is locked, but I mean, you listen to this. I mean, that's the call. That's the coffee
that's
call.
The call. Yeah, so everybody comes scuttling down the track down towards here, and then of course you guys can all sit along here and put the worlds to rights.
Well, yeah, we got seating for 6 plus the concrete bank in there. We got the bob bank and we got the grandstand. So you got everything you want in here, and we can sit there on a bad day. You can see the cafe's fully furnished.
Yes.
He's got the chair, and he's even got a decent swivel chair there for the owner, Albie himself. Albie's got the best chair. He's got the swiveled fabric yellow chair there, which makes him look very, very important. Which he is.
It is. I think he is. I think he's one of the main men on this site.
Key man to the site. Without him, no coffee, no break.
What's amazing is a few years ago you were saying that you started off in the 1950s taking on some of these allotments after your dad.
Yep.
And how many allotments were you running at the time?
Well, it grew gradually. I started off my own little plot. I fought my way in and I got a plot. and I could see a potential for this. And during the 60s, as allotment gardening declined, people became more affluent and they had more time, leisure time. They didn't want to spend it gardening. As every plot became vacant, I took it on until the end. I had a vast empire of 10 of these, which I ran as a nice little hobby, breaking all the rules of allotment gardening, because you should only grow an allotment for your own use, not for sale.
Yeah, sure.
But in those days of the 60s, people were quite happy to let the plots go to me for that purpose. And I made a nice little empire of that. I was probably the Alan Sugar of the 60s in the allotment field.
So you were the guy that initiated all these veggie box schemes that we've got going now. Sort of, organic veggie box schemes are hugely popular now, aren't they? I mean, even I have one. Not in the summer, I hasten to add, because we managed to grow enough veggies for ourselves in the summertime. But so perhaps they sort of took a leaf out of your book and realised that history repeats, though, doesn't it?
The circle continually turns. Back in the late 50s, I could do the stable diet of people living here. They were all in hard-working industry. They were all in coal minings, and they used to eat a tremendous amount of potatoes. They had cooked meals every night when they go home from work. They had a cabbage, potatoes, carrots, runner beans in the season. So what I did was, whatever was on the plot, I got the old wooden boxes which tomatoes just come in from Guernsey in those days. I'd fill our box with wherever they wanted, and I had about 35 customers in the locality. I'd walk around these boxes. They would hand me cash. I'd hand over the box. It was a present, really, because I wasn't allowed to grow for sale. Right. But they just give me cash as a compensation for delivering.
Absolutely.
I only got paid for delivery. I didn't get paid for the vegetables.
Totally. I understand completely. Yeah. Shall we have a wander down anyway? Let's go and try and set this thing up.
Fighting way across this narrow, every inch of space on my plot.
I see you're frugal with your space as you are with everything else. As a man after my own heart.
Waste not one.
No, absolutely. So we found a nice little spot for your wormery anyway.
Next to this rhubab cocktail.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing. You and I were talking about it just now, because I said, how do you control your mealybug? He said, well, I've got a really neat recipe for it. So I was saying, sort of smell this.
Yeah, this is smelly vision, the smelly sound. We smell this wonderful stuff.
I have seen something quite as disgusting, but there was lots of fish guts and whatnot in a rubby dub we used to use for shark fishing, but the smell is similar, I've got to say.
Well, this is wonderful.
Disgusting.
I mean, this is stuff which, if I was back in the Wild West 200 years ago, I could have gone around as Dr. Walton's portion. I'm sure this would grow hair on a bald man's head.
Do you know what? I think there's a market for that now.
It is. I mean, it's a wonderful smell, wonderful reagent.
So really, it's just a question of chucking a load of rhubarb leaves even in a dustbin and just letting them ferment nicely in the water.
And what you do is they take about 6 weeks to reach perfection.
Right.
It's like a good wine.
Yeah, sure.
And then you take that neat. Yeah. And you water over any of your brassica crops, whether it be swede, whether it be cabbage, whether it be Brussels sprouts.
Right.
And that smell will actually run down. It'll deter the cabbage root fly in the base.
Yeah. Any
bugs, which is aphids, mealybug on top, there's such a smell they'll clear off somewhere else.
Right.
And it disguises the cabbage from the cabbage white butterfly. So he's not too keen to lay his eggs on this smelly thing. He thinks it's gone off. So it does work, but you have to keep adding it every time the rain comes, because the smell washes away. Fresh mix, spin on, and you've got a winner.
I guess it's just as well. You can wash it off though, because I can't imagine you'd want to eat a cabbage after it's been laced with that stuff. But I think I might try that at home. But I mean, so for the listeners' benefit, get some rhubarb leaves in a bucket of water and give it a go. It's got to be worth a try.
Now, there's a myth about rhubarb leaves. A lot of people say, aren't they poisonous? Yes, you don't consume rhubarb leaves in the raw. They are poisonous.
Right.
But when they're in this brew and they rot it down, the mixture you got left does not poison the ground, does not poison the plants. There's no ill effect on you whatsoever.
Fantastic. Right.
So it's a myth. Because they're poisonous in the raw state, they're not poisonous in the well-rotted state.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. So, well done. You've made this base, so we've got to take these. Have you got a knife on you? Just to split those.
I've got something sharp in there. I've got a scissors in the shed.
Okay.
One moment.
Okay.
You talk amongst yourselves. While I go and get the scissors. Right.
Okay, we've got this lid open now.
You better tell me what this is.
Right, I better have
this looks rather complicated to me.
It's not so bad. It's quite simple. I mean, having said that, what we should have done beforehand, before setting it up, is we should have soaked this block of coir. But have you got any old well-rotted compost handy?
You better check this. I'm not an expert in this.
We'll just go and get some well-rotted compost, because it serves the same purpose as the coir, really.
Right.
I mean, when you what was the first thing? Because I heard you on Radio 2 several years ago now. I mean, you write for Saga magazine and whatnot as well, don't you?
Not the magazine. I do the website.
Right. Okay.
I do the blog weekly on that on what is actually happening live in the allotments.
Right. Okay. All right.
I've been doing it now for several months, and they still ask me to do it. So
so there must be
reading it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I try to write it as a sort of humorous, floaty tail with a bit of poetic licence in there. So,
yeah. No, you've definitely got that South Walian poetic license
So,
of Bayer for sure.
Does this look good enough for you?
This looks absolutely fantastic. Yeah, this is nicely well rotted.
This is the Mac Walton sandwich stuff, this is.
Right, okay.
So
You were telling me a bit about that earlier on, that you put in kind of a layer of your bean litter and your potato corms, things like that, and then you put a load of horse manure over the top of it.
Yeah, it's what I call a Mac Walton. Been named after some famous restaurant chain there, but I wouldn't advise you eating this, and there's no such thing as a big whopper in this.
I think it might be better though for you.
Well, it might be do you more good.
Yeah.
But what I actually do, I mean, on the allotment during the season, you get a lot of bulk waste, such as potato arms, raw bean material, which are too big for the composting bins.
Right.
So I put about a 5-inch layer of those onto this compost heap,
Right.
which is about what, 6 foot square. And when I get about a 5-inch layer, I go off to one of my local stables and look for horses that's kept on hay.
Right.
Something that's been there about a year or so it's well rotted.
Right.
And I spread 6 to 10 bags of that over the top, and then I put another 5 inches of green material, and then repeat the process. And the heat of the horse manure breaking down attacks this woody and this bulk waste.
Yeah.
And in the end, you can see you get this fabulous looking
It is
compost bin.
absolutely fabulous, I've got
Yeah.
to say. So how old is this stuff that we're just shoveling out of the ground
That's
now?
about 2 years old, and
Is that all? Yeah.
There's very little of it left now, and I use it in the ground, obviously under all my greedy vegetables,
Yeah.
and I also spread it between them as a mulch.
Right.
So I have a double use. It goes
Yeah.
in early in the year as a compost,
Yeah.
give it a base, and then I mulch it to keep the weeds at bay.
Right.
So
Fantastic.
if you look around the plot, you'll see it spread amongst all the crops which are growing.
I think the worms are going to adore that. You know, I think they're going to prefer that.
I
Something
think
can.
I'll
Yeah. No, it's
This is one of the ones up the skip. The handle was broken. Somebody threw it out, but I can still use it.
yeah. Absolutely. So as far as the Jeremy Vine show's concerned, how long have you been out? About 5 years now.
Just over 4 now. I joined. Jeremy took over from Jimmy Young that year. He started in the January.
Yeah.
I got the job in the March, and we've been together ever since. So the combination seems to work.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeremy is learning all the time. He's a very astute character who's in 4 years of gardening is almost as good as Percy Thrower now.
So we put that card in the bottom now, and this is just a tray. So if you empty that into there,
So is all of this in there?
yeah, all of that in there, that'll be great. Oh, I think the worms are going to dig that big time.
Oh, that's good stuff there, isn't
It
it?
is. That is absolutely superb.
Yeah. Right.
So it's absolutely. Well, there's even a worm in here. Look.
Oh,
There's a
you've
little,
got your one
there's a
of
little
your own.
chap you have. You've got one of your own there.
That's a
No,
Welsh
in fact,
one.
it is. That's
Are these English ones going to mix with him now?
That's
or
a
not?
beauty.
I
think
don't want
they'll
any
be-
trouble. I don't want to be like the England-Wales football side.
No, I think-
fighting amongst the wormity.
I think they'll be fine. I think they're all pretty.
They get on well together,
Pretty
eh?
amicable. They do. They get on very well.
That one speaks Welsh. Is that going to be a problem with the rest for communicating?
No, I think they should be all right. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
He's on his own as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. So let's hope the English contingent behave themselves.
Right.
But it's just, I suppose it's just a question of splitting this bag open, really.
Can I carry it along there?
Yeah. There's a couple of thousand in here. I'd be interested how you get on with this.
Oh, it'd be well, is it? I mean,
what you should get off here is lots and lots of liquid, and one of the beauties of wormery really is that you get all the liquid off it.
Right.
So,
shouldn't I stand there on something?
yes, I was going to say we'll put the worms in first, and we'll lift this tray off, and then we'll put the legs on the thing.
Oh, I see. Oh, blimey, there's a lot of them, isn't there?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Yeah, some little big chunky worms, but I think they're probably they're certainly the same genus as that little wormy that you've got in here that I've already seen. So I think they'll all be perfectly happy.
Well, there's
together.
thousands there.
Yeah.
I'll have to watch
Quite literally thousands.
I'll have to watch the local fishermen now. Don't know this is you.
Well, they'll be down here to loin some of these. Yeah.
So is that it though? I mean,
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's it really.
That.
Yeah, and what we'll do
So we
is
have to keep adding to that now.
Yeah, what we'll do is let's let them settle in for a couple of days.
Right.
We put this moisture mat on the top. This is hemp.
Right.
But knowing you the way I do already, you won't want to be buying any more of those moisture mats.
No.
Which you can do, of course. But you could use an old woolly jumper or an old cotton T-shirt or something like that.
Right,
So something that's organic before, something that you can put on the
My
top.
wife would be happy. I'll empty my wardrobe.
Yeah,
a bit now and then.
totally,
All these jumpers
totally.
I keep for the greenhouse will end up in my wormery.
They'll be in there, yeah. So as long as there's something on the top, and that just encourages the worms to work right in under that tray. But then I'd leave them settle in for a couple of days. But then you can start bring a little bit of waste from home. Some of your peelings and things like that.
So keep adding that
Start
to
adding
it.
to it. And they'll love strawberries and carrot tops and all that kind of stuff,
Oh,
especially.
great stuff. Right. Strawberries?
and,
What, real ones?
Yeah, real ones.
I
Yeah.
don't feed them on my strawberries. They're a bit fancy, but these worms.
Should we? I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll just we'll put the legs on and then we'll see how we go.
Right.
So that's the legs on anyway. So,
Right.
so quite literally, these guys are going to settle in now in a couple of days.
Right.
And when you've got up to the level here where the next tray sits on, you can quite literally put your next tray on. So as long as this waste is touching the bottom of the next tray.
Oh, they'll come up through there, will
They'll
they?
come up through. Yeah,
Oh, right.
yeah.
So they'll keep spreading up through the various
Absolutely,
trays.
yeah, and it just means that you're able to harvest the bottom tray much more easily than you would if they're all, the whole system was in one sort of fixed unit.
So, again, now then, so what will happen is you'll have at the bottom a liquid,
Yeah.
plus in this lower tray all the very fine compost that falls through. Is it?
What will happen is because these guys are going to work this. I mean,
Right.
there's not that much in here now, so they're not going to work that too much to break that down anymore.
Right.
So what you could do, I mean, almost in this situation, because they've already got some fantastic compost in there, is you can quite literally scrape a little bit off the top and add it to a second tray now, and then the
Right.
worms will come up into that because you could
right.
start feeding into that tray.
Okay.
So what you're doing is just encouraging the worms to come up through the trays, through the perforations in
Right.
the bottoms of the trays.
So does it ever run out of life or anything at any time? Or
No, it's self-perpetuating, so they'll keep on breeding. I mean, these guys live for
Well,
about
what
2.5
I'm-
years, but...
So what happens at the end? You'll bring the bottom tray up or something, will you?
Yeah, so when you've got your 3 trays working, if you bring this bottom tray
To the top. Right.
and then if you expose it to daylight like this and just scratch that back a little bit there, so it's something that takes 3 seconds every 20 minutes for a couple of hours while you're
Right.
milling around here, scratch it back and literally within 20 minutes all those worms in there will have wiggled their way down through into that layer below.
Oh,
You
right.
can take that out, do exactly the same thing again, and then you can start adding to that tray then.
So repeat. So what do I put on top or underneath every time?
So
Right.
from the bottom tray comes to the top, and you can just leave it on the top and start adding to it
Oh,
again.
okay. Right.
So quite literally the trays are moving around in rotation.
It's like keeping bees, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it's... you did just smoke these suckers out though before you...
No, they don't sting you with it.
No, they don't. No,
They don't bite these. They are quite tame, and they don't bite at all.
No,
They
they're
are quite
fine,
tame.
yeah, they're pretty cool.
They're pretty cool, right?
So what you could do, I mean, the tap, because your liquid would be great for tomatoes and whatnot.
Oh, right.
Off here, but you could either, I mean, if you're like me, I tend to leave the tap open and leave a container underneath because
Oh,
I
let
forget
it
to
drip.
drain them off.
Right.
Yeah, let it drip, and then you can just dilute it down about 10 to 1 and water it out onto
Oh, so yeah,
or you could just empty it straight into your water butts here, and then you don't have
You
to
can
worry
feed
about
straight
dilution.
there.
It's feed straight out of there. Yeah, so
Oh, brilliant.
cool. So
Yeah, this is
should
new.
work
This
a
is
treat. Yeah, well there you go. I mean that's
57
something.
years later, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
So they're the 2 spares now, and
We
do.
always do that. I've learned a great deal coming here today.
So it's a job for tomorrow. I got to go and find a pavement stone to go into that and make more solid.
Yeah,
Read my pamphlet,
Yeah.
and every now and again give these worms a treat.
Yeah, that's
the full plan.
That's about the scale of it. And what you can always do is if you do, I'm pretty sure that you won't run into any difficulties. But if
Right.
you do, you can always give us a ring.
So this
And,
this make even bigger pumpkins for me now then, because I mean
I'm
I usually feed them on beer, so will this
Right.
worm
sure
stuff give them
that's going to be
content?
better than beer.
Right.
So
so
you
much
have to
fun.
see. You have to let
Not
us
so
know how
much
you
fun,
go.
though, is it?
No.
For the beer.
No, you don't want to taste that stuff either
It's not
before
good,
you
is it?
put it on there. No, it's not the same. No,
What a
not at all.
combination! I got worm water
Yeah.
and rhubarb water next to one another.
Yeah.
I can kill with the pest and feed them.
I mean,
feed the plants.
when we look at this setting, it's the most amazing setting now. We've got kind of drifts of rain coming across, but we are on the sloping hillside, sort of southwest facing, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we're quite literally in the Rhondda Valley. You've got these amazing this amazing landscape, this gently sloping, well, that's a contradiction in terms, I suppose. Gently sloping, steep landscape. But you said, I mean, years ago, all that area over there was black.
Yeah, that was
coal
all
mining.
the slag that came out of the bottom of the pits. Obviously, when they were taking the coal out, there was lots of rubbish.
Yeah.
They had to get rid of the rubbish, and it was the cheap way was just to make mountains out of it.
Yeah.
So those mountains you see in the distance were hills originally, and they've now just mounted the mountains of slag that come out of these.
Right.
And over the years, in February, it's all been reclaimed. And you look around, we've a beautiful array of different trees,
Right.
and the whole mountainside is a very, very lush green.
Right.
So you could be in some virgin land now, it had never been scarred by coal mining.
It is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
and of course,
obviously.
you've seen all those changes because
Yes.
you've been here working these allotments for many, many years.
Yeah, I came in and walked through that gate in 1950 as a 4-year-old.
Right.
Took my first plot in 1957 as an 11-year-old, and I'm still on the same allotment that I was then. So
That's amazing.
man, boy, and old man.
Yeah. Because you've just brought a book out, haven't you, as well? April, you said it was published.
Yeah, it came out on April the 2nd, and it's my life on hillside allotments, which
Right.
really sums up this place very well.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's how the allotments, it's not an autobiography as such, it's a biography of how this allotment has been the central focus of my life through all those years.
Right.
How it's kept me sane, how it's been my stress counsellor,
Yeah.
it's given me a suntan, it's given me gym, it's given me everything I want. And then
I've got to say, you got a good tan.
well, I mean, you look at the spot here, it's a wonderful sun
Yeah,
top.
yeah, it is, yeah.
I spend several hours of every single day of the week on this allotment. It's a great place to be, not only for work and growing the vegetables, but for social side as well.
Yeah.
And you have the added advantage, you can fill your carrier bags with some fresh vegetables, take them home, and several hours later they can be sitting at your dining room table eating what you've produced.
Yeah,
You can't get any fresh on that. There's not an air mile on any of this vegetable I eat in my house. There's not an air mile.
Right.
And I am about 80% self-sufficient throughout the whole year, not just in the summer months.
Right.
I freeze my excesses, I store my potatoes, I store my onions, I grow lots of winter veg. So for 10.5 months of the year I can be feeding something off this allotment.
Yeah, that's quite an achievement.
And that's what makes it very, very attractive, is that I don't have to contribute to these supermarket profits.
No, fair play. That's a great sentiment.
And that all comes from a 10-perch plot.
Yeah.
Again, I, as you can see yourself, I don't believe in wasting an inch of space.
No, it's you'd have a job cramming anything into this now. I think that really is. Yeah, superb.
Yeah. Again, that's all down to the fertility of the soil. If the soil is good, you can grow more because you're not depleting it.
It does look rich.
And compost making has always been a thing I'm very, very fervent about, and I make a lot of compost, and that going back into the soil does help. I'm organic. I had no artificial fertilizers at all.
Yeah.
Everything is grown naturally.
Yeah.
And again, it's healthy. And if it's grown healthy, it can get over attacks of pests, and also will encourage all the gardeners' friends and all the predators.
Yeah.
So, most of the stuff you can see, with the exception of those few cabbage where the mealy bug took over.
It does look gorgeous. You've got these lovely rows of beetroot and parsnips and carrot and potatoes and peas and sweet corn. I mean, they're just a whole plethora of veg. It does look amazing. And it's kind of making my mouth water, really. So I think I'm going to have to tuck in some of your radishes in a minute.
Again, come back in about 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
And you can be you've already feasted on the strawberries.
Yeah,
they're
beautiful as well. Yeah,
but the rest of the stuff is all coming along quite nicely. I mean, Sunday lunch we had fresh new potatoes from here. We had a nice cabbage from here. We had broad beans, and it was fantastic. And within a matter of another week, I'll be pulling carrots, and then you can see then the rest of the stuff will come along. I'm already pulling my winter onions.
Right, we've managed to get ourselves in the greenhouse, at least get some protection. I'm not sure this little recording device is waterproof.
We now got the accompaniment of some nice Welsh rain falling on this plastic roof.
Yeah, that's it's almost like camping, isn't it?
I had to buy that, believe it?
I don't believe it. But what's amazing, because Amazon, for instance, they sold, because I think your book's been particularly popular, hasn't it?
Yes.
And I think they said something like 8 out of 10 of their best-selling books last year about growing vegetables. So there's a real movement, folks are really getting into it now. So families are really, they've realised that growing your own veggies is so much better for you in a whole load of different ways than just simply going down to the supermarket and buying some of their, horrible, far too perfect, ugly vegetables. So if you grow your own stuff, and you've got, how many allotments are on this site all told?
There's 42 of original plots. There's 25 under full cultivation now, and they're looking good.
Right.
The top plots many years ago, back in the late 60s, went back to nature because there was no demand. I couldn't manage more than 10.
Right.
When I got to 10, I was exhausted, so I couldn't manage the top as well.
Yeah.
They gone back. Several of them now, and we got some chicken farmers up in house, which is handy because a pound of beans buys you a dozen eggs, so there's a good exchange rate there. And one corner we've allowed to go back to trees and nature, which is great because we can get our pea sticks from there.
Yeah.
The birds can nest there, and we have a couple of foxes there, which keeps the rabbits at bay.
Yeah.
So that's a little nature reserve, and we're quite happy to be that there. The council quite happy to be there. They don't charge us for that bit of land, and it's a nice little nature reserve, well protected.
Yeah.
So in total now, there's probably about 40 plots, either under cultivation or farming in ways that we've got chickens on them, which is great. Because again, that gives us the chicken manure, which well rotted over a year, 18 months, is fantastic stuff for the soil.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose it's been a real pleasure meeting you. It's been great to have this chat. It's amazing, really, to think that I'm chatting to a bloke that I've listened to for many years on a Friday when I get a chance to listen to the show. But superb, and I'm interested. Will be interested to see how you get on with your wormery.
Right, I'll have a study in those notes this evening, and I shall be watching that very carefully over the next few weeks.
We'll definitely keep in touch.
Okay, great, and I'm looking forward to this. It's a new experiment, another first.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cheers, Terry. Thanks
okay,
a lot.
fine. Thanks.
Bulls, Phil.
Well, yes, we've had a bit of a moment this morning. Phone call first thing this morning, and my landlady down at the farm down at Abergavenny said that the cattle had got out. She actually said they'd been out all night and all on the road and everything. So dashed down there, and they were all back in the field. That Chris had got them back in. But our neighbour Mary, who's retired to the house on the edge of the farm, said that she'd gone out to put her bin bags out and thought there'd been a road accident in her Leylandii hedge at sort of either end of her gatepost. But I don't think there'd been a road accident. Bulls have very itchy heads, and Leylandiis are very good for itching bulls' heads. And he'd helped himself, and this Leylandii was not very well at all.
So another use for Leylandii.
Yeah, what an excellent way of getting rid of it all.
Absolutely.
Well, it certainly pruned it. It pushed half of it off.
Big old things, bulls.
So next week we've got extracts from Terry Walton's book coming up. We'll catch up with another week on the farm, and there's lots of gardening going on this week at Wiggly's, so we'll hear a bit more about that. So bye from me, Heather at Wiggly Wigglers.
That's bye from me, Richard.
It's bye from me, Farmer Phil. But what about Monty's Wormcast?
Next week, there's no time, Phil. If you want to subscribe, go to iTunes. If you just clicked on this, listen to the show for once. All you need to do is go to iTunes, click on subscribe, and we'll arrive every single week without fail on your laptop or your computer.
Brace
Don't
yourself.
miss it.